Welcome to the NXT Podcast, your home for weekly NXT reviews and insight.
The beautiful part of NXT is that when one dream ends, another dream begins.
Find all of your NXT news, recaps, and analysis right here. So with that being said, we only have one question for you.
Are you ready?
We thought so. Let's get the show started right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the NXT Podcast. As always, my name is Zachary Smith. I am your host to talk about NXT from this week. I'm happy to be here with you. Before we get started, as you know, or may or may not know, I suppose, you can always find me as well on Twitter. I am at ZachNXT. That's at ZACHNXT. We're always talking about wrestling and other fun stuff over there. Come check us out. Now, we're talking about NXT this week, and not necessarily a ton happening on this show. We had a number one contenders match that was very good. That's always exciting. But other than that, this was kind of a setup for the New Year's Evil show that we're going to be having. So it was one of those shows where we furthered some storylines, but we didn't necessarily have that much going on in the show itself that was super interesting. But we'll go over that. As you know, generally we talk about the news and the notes and what's going on in wrestling. And the biggest thing that it seems has happened this week is about our boy Keith Lee. You'll remember Keith Lee from the Indies, and he came to NXT and tore it up. I was trying to think, and I think in the whole of the time he was in NXT, I only remember him having one bad match, and that was his last NXT match against Carrion when he lost the NXT title. And that was only a bad match because Carrion got hurt in that match, and they had to kind of limp to the finish. That was when Carrion hurt himself and eventually had to give up that title. He was the first NXT and North American champion at the same time. And Keith Lee is a big boy. He's very charismatic. He has it, whatever you call it. And he's very good in the ring. He could do things that other big men and really other wrestlers at all can't do. And so when he got called to the main roster, as an NXT fan, when somebody gets called over, you tend to have mixed emotions. So on one hand, you're very happy for them because, you know, Keith Lee's probably a guy who wants to be on Raw or SmackDown. But on the other hand, as an NXT fan, you've seen a lot of NXT wrestlers go to the main roster, and WWE has a habit of wiping the slate clean when you move from NXT. So generally, they don't bring your history with you. They kind of bring you out as if you were a new wrestler. They don't tend to lean on the same things that made you successful in NXT. I don't know why that is. I think it's probably a function of the people who are the decision makers on the main roster have different ideas than the people who run NXT, and since, in this case, Keith Lee's going to be on the main roster, they think that they basically are just going to almost repackage a person. But Keith Lee makes his debut on the main roster, and he does so in very strong fashion. He is immediately in a feud or a mini feud with Randy Orton, and he has a pay-per-view match with Randy Orton, and this is during Orton's red hot heel run or bad guy run, and he hadn't lost a lot of matches, and Keith Lee beat him on a pay-per-view. and beat him convincingly, as a point of fact. And it was, wow, Keith Lee has arrived. Really, the only problems with Keith Lee on the main roster were, one, his gear on that first night, and two, they took his entrance theme from him, which was a banger, and they gave him a generic fair use rock track that they had in the back. So that's fine. They changed the theme, and it's a lot better now, so we can work with that. And for what he has been given, he has been very successful. Now, he hasn't been given a lot. You heard reports of, the powers that be love Keith Lee and want to give him the world, and then you hear reports that they don't know what to do with Keith Lee. Now, a lot of times with reports like that, I take it with a grain of salt, but given the way that he came in and what they did with him after it, I think that has to be true. So he's on the main roster, and he's successful with what they are giving him. Now, the reports are that recently the powers that be and Vince McMahon decided to send Keith Lee, and I believe Otis as well, back to training to refine his ring skills, because he was, I guess, not happy with the way that he had been performing in the ring. So, because of that, Keith Lee's going back to training. And I remember seeing it and thinking, that's weird. Of the people on the main roster, I do not think that Keith Lee is somebody that would come to mind as somebody that needs more training. He doesn't strike me as a guy that struggles in the ring. So this seems to me like Vince or somebody just doesn't like the way that he works. Now, on one hand, it's fine to improve or to do things more in the quote-unquote WWE style. Maybe they think that he's too indie or NXT with his moves, but he's never been bad in the ring. He's always had very good matches. It's one of his hallmarks, so I don't quite understand. It just seems like we're finding random things to nitpick at this point. And I think that there's a lot of people that you could send back for training before Keith Lee. And to have, in this case, Vince sending Keith Lee back for training while still writing Raw a couple of hours before the show, and frankly coming up with mostly bad ideas these days, I just think it's funny that that person still has the power to send somebody for training. So the person who is very clearly well past their prime and should not be a decision maker is still a decision maker, and because of that, he's sending somebody back for training that really does not need it. And this doesn't happen very often, where somebody is basically sent back. And I don't understand why Keith Lee would be the person that you do that with. And I don't even know if it's a thing where they're unhappy with him, or if maybe they just don't have any ideas for him. Because again, he came out very strong out the gate. Vince McMahon has a propensity to treat wrestlers like new toys, and a kid will play with a new toy and play with it a lot, and then one day they get bored with it and leave it in the toy chest, and then if they get a new toy, they tend to get very bored of the other one. And he does that with wrestlers, and he certainly does that with call-ups. So, come last year's Survivor Series, he was all about Keith Lee. He had him as the last man standing for NXT with Roman Reigns, and Roman Reigns gave him respect. And he was clearly on the rise, and Vince clearly liked him. So I don't really understand what happened between then and now that he's now unhappy with him. And I certainly don't understand what he's going to do better in the ring. I don't see him messing things up. I don't see him missing timing on a lot of stuff. I see a person who's very good in the ring. I see somebody that's aimless, but I don't see that as a Keith Lee problem. I see that as a Vince McMahon and the people that put together the show problem. Because if you give him something to do, he will do it. Everything that he's been given, he's done a great job with. But if you don't give him anything to do, he can't do anything. But Keith Lee's going back for training. Vince McMahon and the writers are not going back to English comp or storytelling 101 or TV plotline 101. They're not going to any of that. All the decision makers are staying in place. So nothing's actually going to change. He's going to come back. He's going to maybe have a couple more moves, and then they're still not going to know what to do with him. So none of this is going to matter, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you've improved in the ring or not. It matters whether they have something for you. And they've shown that if they don't have something for you, they're not super motivated to think of anything. So hopefully Keith Lee's around, and hopefully they get over whatever this stupid issue is that they have with him, because if anybody should not be talking about somebody's ability as it appears in WWE, it's Vince McMahon to Keith Lee. So, I mean, Vince McMahon has built his legacy, and he's the reason we're all here, but Vince McMahon is also a cutthroat businessman, and he was already looking for Hulk Hogan's replacement early on in Hulkamania because he thought he was old and past his prime. And it's just funny that he doesn't have that same clear plan of action when it comes to himself. So hopefully that happens one day too, if we're sending people back. So, like I said, we had NXT this week, and it was not necessarily an action-packed show, very much a setup show, again, for New Year's Evil coming up. Now, this is a show where, I mean, you had AEW going on at the same time. AEW has forged a partnership with Impact, and they had a lot of stuff going on their show. Sting is back, or rather, Sting is there, I suppose, not back. And you have a lot of cool stuff going on. Here on NXT, we're building toward a good show in New Year's Evil, but we don't have a ton of exciting stuff going on. And even on New Year's Evil, it's already a couple of rematches. Raquel Gonzalez and Rhea Ripley is going to be a rematch of a good match that they had, but a rematch. And Finn Balor versus Kyle O'Reilly is a rematch of the last NXT title match. So you have that as well. They seemed to set up Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch to defend the tag titles against either a couple of members of Undisputed Era or Breezango, which would be a rematch. So you have Johnny Gargano. I'm not sure who he's defending the North American title against. If he defends it against either Damien Priest or Leon Ruff, that would also be a rematch. So, while we have a lot of matches that are going to be good, we don't have a lot that's going to be new. So, as far as this show goes, we start at the end of Kushida's entrance, and we see that Leon Ruff is already in the ring. I love that Leon Ruff was just the NXT North American champion, and now he just does not get an entrance, and he's just here. That's about what I thought. That title run was very much part of a story and nothing else. It wasn't so much they believed in Leon Ruff, although they had to put the title on him. It was for the story. So that's over now. So they're in the ring, and we are told that we have a tag match. And the announcers say that it was supposed to be Leon Ruff tagging with Damien Priest, but he's unable to compete, so we get Kushida instead. I'm not complaining, Kushida's great. So Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory come out. Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell are here as well. Whole Gargano family here. So we have a pretty good match, and at the end here, Austin Theory tags in, and Leon Ruff doesn't see it, so Leon Ruff is just attacking Johnny Gargano as if he was still the legal man. While he's doing that, Austin Theory kicks Leon Ruff in the head and hits his finisher to pick up the win. So, pretty good match. I mean, not a lot to it, but good finish. I mean, you certainly want to have Austin Theory and Gargano pick up the win. Before he joined the Gargano family and had the ghost face mask, Austin Theory had a bunch of losses in a row, and so I think it's good to have Austin Theory be the one to get the pin, and hopefully he's more successful with Johnny and Candice and Indy in that group. And so it makes sense that he would beat Leon Ruff. You're going to do more with Kushida. Of the 4 men in this match, Leon Ruff is the one that you're not going to do the most with, so you can pin him. That's what he was before he won the title anyway, is an enhancement talent, and it keeps Austin Theory on a rise, and so I'm good with that. So we cut to the side, and Dexter Lumis is sitting on a stool in front of a table, and he's looking at, I wasn't sure if it was a tablet or if it was a pad of paper, and it cuts away, and then it comes back, and Lumis is still sitting there, and he's drawing like a little devil and the words New Year's Evil. So I guess he's drawing today. This doesn't seem to have any point other than to remind you that New Year's Evil is a thing that's going to be happening. Doesn't really add anything for Dexter Lumis, and I don't. It doesn't set up a feud for him, and even if it did, it would be a dumb way to start a feud. So I don't know what he's doing, unless it's just to hype the show itself, and then he'll get a match later. But this is going to pop up 1 or 2 more times, and I never figured out why. So while that's happening, Undisputed Era makes their entrance, minus Bobby Fish. I don't know where he is, but a lot of times he doesn't come out with them. It's always weird when a member of a faction does not come out with the faction, but happens a lot. So it's going to be Kyle O'Reilly versus Pete Dunne. This is a continuation from last week, and the winner of this match faces Finn Balor at New Year's Evil for the NXT title. It's at this point that I have questions, because in the talk off, we'll call it, last week, it was Pete Dunne, Damien Priest, Kyle O'Reilly, and Carrion Cross's girlfriend. So I don't understand, just in the storyline, why Priest isn't a part of this anymore. I mean, I know Damien Priest and Carrion Cross are going to do a thing. Carrion Cross attacked Damien Priest. Priest nailed it only after his girlfriend came out to intimidate everyone. But I know it's Damien Priest, Carrion Cross, but it's weird that they were part of the title discussion and part of that segment. If they weren't going to be involved the next week, I think you could still have a fatal 4-way and have that lead into Damien Priest, Carrion Cross. It's just weird that last week Damien Priest and I'm sure Carrion Cross were interested in the NXT title, and this week they just aren't around. I don't know. It's weird. And it's also odd that Kyle O'Reilly's in this discussion and would get another shot since he just lost a title match against Finn. Before Finn got hurt, his first defense was Kyle O'Reilly, and it was a very good match, but in storyline purposes, he's already lost to Finn, so I don't really know. He didn't really have to earn this title match except for this match. He basically got it by talking his way into it, and it's always weird when somebody loses a title match and then gets another chance when they lost clean in the middle of the ring. On the other hand, Karrion Kross had to give up the title because of injury. right? He never got beat for it. He got injured in the very same match that he won it against Keith Lee. They had been building him for a long time. Keith Lee had a very short NXT title run. At the time, it was okay because he was going to the main roster. I don't know why I thought that would be good. But Karrion Kross wins the title and gets injured in the same match, and basically almost immediately has to relinquish the NXT title. And Finn said to Karrion Kross' girlfriend last week that if Kross is ready, he's ready. Seems like that's the match. It seems like if you have a champion who had to give up the title and was never beaten for it and had to just give it up due to injury, and then they come back, you would think the first thing they would do is not attack Damien Priest because he said something to your girlfriend. You would think that he would attack the champion. I mean, personally, if I lost a title but nobody beat me for it, I think the first thing I would do is be screaming from the rafters that Finn Balor isn't the legitimate NXT champion and I'm coming back for that title. What I would not do is focus my energy on Damien Priest because he said if he has a problem, he can come see me himself, which, again, as I said last week, was a good point. So I understand they're doing something different with him right now, but logically, in the world of the story, I think it would make sense to come right for the title, I would think. So Pete Dunne would have a great feud with Finn, and Pete Dunne is at the best that maybe he's ever been right now, but it seems too soon to have Pete Dunne go for it because it feels like when Pete Dunne goes for the NXT title, Pete Dunne should win it, and Finn essentially just won the NXT title and defended it once and then got hurt and just barely avoided having to relinquish the title again. And it just seems soon to take the title off of Finn. So I think that Pete Dunne is going to be NXT champion at some point, but I don't think you need to rush it. So also as a reminder, Pete Dunne is shredded now. So we have Pete Dunne and Kyle O'Reilly. So Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch come out before the match starts, our NXT Tag Champions. And Killian Dane runs out, and he starts attacking both of them. The Undisputed Era joins in and get in a brawl. And then somebody slips into the ring and runs and jumps on both of them, and it's Breezango are back as well. And Breezango being back doesn't feel like a big deal at all, because why would it? They just jumped from the ring. You barely even saw their faces at all. They just were in up massive bodies. That's a great representation of Breezango and how WWE's felt about them the whole time. So, big tag team brawl, and they start kind of brawling to the back. While all of this is happening, Pete Dunne and Kyle O'Reilly are in the ring, and Pete Dunne and Kyle O'Reilly do not stop staring at each other, even when the chaos breaks out. So they're staring at each other the whole time, and the bell rings, and they start swinging immediately. These two don't like each other. They were on opposite side of the War Games match. They're here to fight. So we have an excellent match. Pete Dunne ends up with, hard to describe. So he's down on his stomach in the ring, and his legs are on the rope, so he's at a little bit of an elevated position. And Kyle O'Reilly jumps from the top rope and drives his knee into the back of Pete Dunne's head, and that actually gets the 3 count. So, Kyle O'Reilly will take on Finn Balor for the NXT title, presumably at New Year's Evil. So, Kyle O'Reilly's not going to win the NXT title. He already had a title match and lost, so this is a rematch. But it should at least be a good match. This is one of those matches where, it doesn't even necessarily make a ton of sense for him to be the guy. Not back-to-back, and I know he's not going to win. But much like a lot of Io Shirai's title defenses, even if I know that the champion is going to defend, or rather successfully defend the title, still going to be a good match, so it's going to be fun to watch. So I can work with that. So this was, like I said, it was an excellent match for the time that it got. It didn't get as much time as I thought that it would. And I thought that it was going to be the main event of the show. It didn't end up being, and that's fine. I just thought it would be. I thought that the show was wrapping up, and I thought, oh, that was kind of quick. I do hope that I see these two in the ring together again soon, because they're very good together. And again, I don't think Pete Dunne should go for the title until he's going to win the title. So I understand having him lose here. He doesn't lose anything by losing. He had a war with Kyle O'Reilly, and Kyle happened to come out on top. And I would rather him lose here than lose the title match itself. So, Shotzi Blackheart is out in her tank. Thank goodness she got a new one. She got a new tank that looks way cooler. It's got a skull on the front, seems a little bit bigger, because as a person, Shotzi Blackheart cannot handle not having a tank. So thank goodness. I forget why she has a new tank, but she has a new tank. So Indy Hartwell's already in the ring for their match. Johnny, Candice, and Austin Theory are on the are at ringside rather. So they have a match. Candice distracts Shotzi. While that's happening, Indy Hartwell grabs that trophy that they brought out last week and hits Shotzi in the stomach with the trophy. She does it while the referee's looking at her, so she's immediately disqualified. So Shotzi wins by DQ. And then Indy just kind of looks around and looks at the ref as if she thought the ref's back was going to be turned, or that she didn't know what to do next. I don't know how long Indy Hartwell's been wrestling, but some of Indy Hartwell's reactions are odd to me and a little understated. I think being with Johnny and Candice is going to help with that, but Indy's definitely not ready to go off by herself yet, and that's fine, but it showed here to me. So Candice and Indy start beating up Shotzi while everyone laughs, and we just kind of go off with that. So we have Carrion Cross out next. Scarlett's here as well. This entrance is still really cool. Starts black and white, and then after Fall and Bray, it goes in color. There's Smoke Machine. It looks really cool. It's a really cool entrance. Scarlett's great with it. Carrion Cross is good at being menacing when he's not having to send his girlfriend out. They had a couple vignettes for Carrion Cross talking about making his way back and a path of destruction in his wake, and so on and so forth. So he's going against Desmond Troy, who is an enhancement talent who's already in the ring. So the thing is, I understand why you have somebody in there with enhancement talent, right? It makes them look fierce. It shows off some of their moves. It gets them, ring work, knocks some of the ring rust off, gets them on TV. Got it. But it's weird to see Karrion Kross in squash matches against enhancement talent, when the last time he was here, we saw Karrion Kross in several squash matches against enhancement talent. And it really just feels like more of the same. Like, there's nothing new there. And I get it. You're going to have, it seems like, him go against Damien Priest, and Damien Priest is going to be out for a little bit, I guess, because of that attack last week. And so you can't do anything there. So what are you going to do? But it is just odd seeing Karrion Kross with an enhancement talent again, because you generally, once somebody has gone from enhancement talent to quote-unquote regular wrestlers on the roster, they don't go back. You don't generally see it. Like Braun Strowman doesn't fight James Ellsworth anymore, kind of thing. So Karrion Kross wins, obviously, very quickly. It cuts to Dexter Lumis, who's still drawing. Now, there's a cartoon drawing of a devil and him with New Year's Evil. It's weird, and I don't see a point. Backstage, Toni Storm is heading to the ring, as is Rhea Ripley. Toni Storm is out first. She and Rhea have been kind of circling each other for a bit. They were on opposite sides of the Women's War Games match, so this should be a very good one-on-one match. They've had battles in NXT UK. I forget if that was for the women's title in NXT UK. Don't remember, but they have a history That's not just in NXT proper. So, Rhea, during the match, has Toni Storm up, but Raquel Gonzalez comes, I don't know if she was in the crowd or under the ring, but she comes out and helps Toni. She pulls Toni off of Rhea's shoulders. Now, while the ref's back is turned, Raquel picks up Rhea Ripley and runs her into the post. Because of the help, Toni Storm runs over and basically runs her hip into Rhea Ripley in the corner and then brings her out of the corner and hits her finisher. So Toni Storm beats Rhea Ripley. This is good. Toni Storm and Rhea have a really good match. Toni Storm gets a big win. That had been a problem for her. She had help from Raquel Gonzalez, so it doesn't hurt Rhea Ripley that she lost. And it sets up Rhea Ripley and Raquel Gonzalez going forward, which I think is happening at New Year's Evil. That's the last match on this show, so as best I remember then, New Year's Evil shakes out to be Finn Balor defending against Kyle O'Reilly. That's going to be Finn Balor. Io Shirai, I'm going to guess, is taking on maybe Toni Storm. I think Io would still win that match. I don't know who Johnny's going to get for the North American title, whether that's, if it's Leon Ruff again, I don't know why it would be. Maybe Pete Dunne, that would be good. You're going to have probably Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch against one or both of Undisputed Era and Breezango. Let's see, you're going to get Rhea Ripley versus Raquel Gonzalez. Presumably you're going to get Dexter Lumis versus somebody, but I don't know who yet. So you have Carrion Cross versus Damien Priest. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that's going to be a good match. I feel like both of those guys usually get in there with people that are like that will bounce around for them because they're big dudes, and they're both big dudes. So I don't know if I love that. I'm going to be honest. New Year's Evil is not picking up to be the most interesting show. NXT is very good at big shows, and I'm sure that the matches are going to be very good. But as it stands right now, none of those matches particularly excite me, mostly because most of them are rematches. And I've seen them, and I can see with a few of them clearly who's going to win because I've already seen the story. It kind of feels like a holding pattern, and it feels like AEW is doing really well, and so they wanted a counterpunch, and I don't think this is it. AEW has very good wrestling, but they have a lot of interesting stories going on right now, and they're actually working with Impact, working with another company, which, of course, WWE would not do. And I think in a situation like that, you need to up your game, and thus far, I don't think NXT has. NXT is not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not as interesting as it could be. This was a lot of setup, and, for example, the Pete Dunne, Kyle O'Reilly story was good, but it wasn't, it didn't feel like a big deal. So we're just kind of left with New Year's Evil, which is going to be a good show, but I don't think it's going to be a great show. And I sincerely hope that I'm wrong about that, but it doesn't seem like it. So we're just kind of left with that. So, I mean, hopefully next week NXT can pick it up, and now that we've established some of the stories, we can continue them, maybe get a few surprises. I don't see any reason why NXT would overtake AEW in the ratings. Frankly, they shouldn't. AEW is more exciting. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. We have an NXT show, that's me. We have an AEW show as well. I listen to both, and they're both great, and I want AEW to do well, and it's getting close to 1 million viewers every week. And until NXT starts changing some things and WWE starts changing some things, AEW is going to be around for a long time. That's not changing, and they're the more exciting show. And if you're going to watch wrestling, a lot of people have been choosing AEW, and I get it. If I didn't do the podcast, I don't know which one I would watch. I've always been an NXT guy, so probably still NXT, but I would certainly add AEW to it. So, more power to them. But all we can hope for is that next week is better. Again, not a bad show, just not the most interesting show. But I had a lot of fun talking about it, and I hope that I made at least this part interesting for you. Again, on Twitter, you can always find me. I'm at ZachNXT, at ZACHNXT. Let me know what you thought about this week. Let me know what you thought about Kyle O'Reilly being the number one contender. Do you think it's going to be interesting? Do you think it's going to be bad? What do you think of Damien Priest, Carrion Cross? I'm a little worried. Let me know over there. But in the meantime, that's all I've got for you, which means that is my time. So I have been Zachary Smith. You have been fantastic, and thank you very much for listening.